I was never a huge fan of Pinocchio P growing up. While I found Slow Motion to be a good song, I was never able to fully connect with his other hits like Common World Domination until years later. But there is one song that he wrote that connected with me almost instantly the first time I heard it. I'm Glad You're Evil Too. When this song came out in 2016, I instantly fell in love with it. And for the first time in my life, I understood the hype that surrounded Pinocchio P as a producer. There was something so drastically different about this song that made it stand out to me from his previous work. Something that could still make me well up with tears even listening to it today. Sure, you can quickly conclude this to the drastic change in tone. I mean, Pinocchio P essentially threw out everything we thought we knew about him when he released this song. His upbeat electronic production had been tossed out for a somber and dark piano melody. The bright yellows, pinks, and blues of his art were now swapped for dark grays and blacks. It was like seeing a flower wilt before your eyes. While there was something instantly captivating about it, you weren't exactly sure if it was sad or beautiful, or maybe just a little bit of both. But at its heart, there's a lot about this song that makes it, in my opinion, a masterpiece. I've never been a strong believer that there's only one way to interpret a song. For example, I've seen people make parallels that the evil Pinocchio P is referring to here is the idea of giving up dreams or ideals. And I've seen others talk about how it represents our greedy desires of consumerism. And I don't think either one of those interpretations is wrong. There are very much lines in this that could be interpreted as someone holding on to some sort of escape, whether that be a phone, computer, clothes, or so forth. And those theories very much fall into line with Pinocchio P's other work. His songs are typically focused on trying to evoke the audience to reflect on social issues or the major flaws with humanity. But to be honest, I kinda just saw it as a simple love song. Sure, it certainly doesn't hold back on the negatives like his other work, but what it drastically did different to me is that the main theme of the piece was hope. It was a positive reflection. Maybe that comes off as a surface level interpretation, but I kinda like the idea that love can still bloom and change people's lives for the better, despite the flaws their partner may have or how awful things might get around them. It was like the song was made to represent the direct opposite of all Pinocchio P's previous work. And at 6 minutes and 30 seconds, I'm Glad You're Evil Too even stands as the second longest single Pinocchio P has ever released, just behind Core in 2015. But unlike Core, I'm Glad You're Evil Too was universally successful both with his fans and the vocaloid scene, becoming one of his defining tracks years later. And while the concept of a 6-minute long song wouldn't shock the average listener, if you've been in the vocaloid scene long enough, you should find this a little abnormal. You see, there's a trend you can find within almost every popular song. Something simple that they all have in common, and hasn't changed since the scene's inception. The vast majority are 3 to 4 minutes in length. Are you kidding me right now?
Where's the Evil Chronicles video?
Okay, maybe that's not a huge shocker. After all, that is the standard length for a song. But have you ever considered why that is? I mean, think about it. Only a few centuries ago, weren't musical compositions far longer than this? I can assure you, this trend in music only gets weirder once you know the truth. We owe the success of the 3-minute song to vinyl records and the invention of the single. When the 45 RPM record was introduced in the 40s, it offered a cheap and affordable way to market music to teenagers, by selling individual songs instead of full albums. But the major pitfall that came with the 45 can actually be found in its title. The disc moved at 45 revolutions per minute, meaning it could provide a great sound by how fast it can move, but the catch was, the faster the record is, the less information it could store as a result, and you ended up with a vinyl that can only hold around 3 minutes of music. Therefore, records were typically printed on 33s instead. While it's true you can hold a song longer than 3 minutes on a 45 by using both sides, no radio station was going to stop a song just to flip a record while live on the air. So if an artist wanted to get playtime and make it big, they had no choice but to conform. Not only that, but since it was much smaller as well, it offered an easy way for radio stations to share music too. So the popularity of the 45 with the radio and the mainstream market essentially burned the concept of the 3-minute song into modern day society, and the concept of the single was born. But those days are long over, or at least they should have been. The radio and even physical media for music lost their stranglehold on the market years ago when the internet was introduced. So why does this idea still prevail even in scenes like Vocaloid that should have started with a clean slate? Well, I think the internet, the same reason this concept should have been falling apart, is also the same one holding it together. In a culture where new songs are being uploaded non-stop every hour of every day, these artists have a very tight window to grab their audience's attention. And while it would be nice if every one of us could just listen to every song that came out, we simply don't have that kind of time. So as an artist, the quicker you can get your audience engaged with your song, the better. So why did a song over double that length succeed when in theory it should have failed? One thing that I noticed when I was investigating to see what people had to say about this song and why they loved it, is that they constantly talked about how beautiful it was and their connection to the lyrics. That's actually what I expected to see for the most part. But something else surprised me the more I kept digging. I found a lot of people as well talking about how this song seems to change every minute, or how powerful the song felt by the time they reached the end. They essentially formed a strong connection to the composition of the song. And I think a lot of that power and emotion this song seems to evoke in us comes down to the concept of tension and release. Take How to Disappear Completely by Radiohead for example. As you may have noticed, the beginning of this song is very eerie and uncomfortable. The most prominent instrument is just a hollow acoustic guitar with these haunting synths floating in and out in the background. And it's not until a full minute in that Tom York, the lead singer, finally comes in. But when he does, he almost sounds utterly defeated and slurred. Now, I can understand that some people might find this completely boring. After all, there's not much happening. So what about this song made Tom say this?
If you could pick one song that you'd like to be remembered by, what
How
would
to
it be?
Disappear off Kid.
Why?
Because it's the most beautiful thing we ever did, I think.
Well, while it's true the beginning of this song is very basic and slow, you can tell that it's focused. One thing that I really love about this introduction is that it builds anticipation. I'm constantly thinking about where the piece will go next, and the result is that I feel like I'm being transported to another world. And I kinda get a similar feeling when I listen to I'm Glad You're Evil too. That piece also doesn't start you off with much either. Pinocchio P in a very similar minimalistic style only starts you off with a basic piano melody and a bass playing in the background. But as both of these songs go on, notice how they keep adding more instruments to the piece. In Disappear Completely, you can start to hear a tambourine, light strings, and even abstract synths. In Evil, there's something new going on every minute. One minute it's a complex layer of synths, the next is a hammering snare drum. But the overall nature of both pieces is gradually becoming more energetic. It's almost as if they're coming alive. And this at its heart is the concept of tension. When a song purposely pulls back on certain sections of the main idea in order to build our anticipation, until the climax of the piece is reached, leading us to our resolution. You'll find tension and release in almost every piece of music that you listen to, but very few songs are willing to try this long-range tension and release like Radiohead or Pinocchio P did. And that's because there's a level of complexity that comes with writing a song like that. Remember when we were talking about how modern music has been following this standard 3-minute cycle? Another aspect of music that was affected by this was song structure. You can find in most popular pieces of music that they follow a standard verse-chorus structure. And there's nothing wrong with that. Some of my favorite songs of all time follow this. But one thing that artists has to consider when they make a song in this format is that there are limitations to what you can do with it. And this was essentially what Pinocchio P understood and realized when he wrote a song like I'm Glad You're Evil too. As we stated earlier, most songs follow this standard convention of verse-chorus structure. Some artists will even bend it too. What helped make songs like World Is Mine so effective is that Rio began his piece with a preview of his chorus, but still followed this basic structure. And by starting his piece with the most powerful part of his song, his chorus, he was able to instantly grab his audience's attention. But here's what makes Pinocchio P's song interesting. It takes a full minute and a half before we reach this crucial moment of the chorus. Not only does the song proceed into its first verse after it starts, but the second verse begins immediately after that. But Pinocchio P had a reason for doing this. Because by increasing the length of that introduction, Pinocchio P is creating an anticipation for us once that first chorus is reached. So hypothetically speaking, we know nothing about this song. Moving into the third verse, what do you expect to happen? If you're thinking the most natural choice here would be another double verse, I don't blame you. But at this point, the audience has already caught on to what the composer is trying to do. And by maintaining that same length, it would only bore us. So what Pinocchio P does instead is simply decrease it to one verse. But notice how the tension is still growing. Instruments are still gradually being added on. Until we're around this point here. This gradual decrease in intensity might naturally make you think we've reached the climax of the piece. After all, this is the first time the song has broken any momentum since the start. But it's when we hear that piano pick up again that we realize what happened. This was only the bridge, not the conclusion. And Pinocchio P was trying to throw us off from the actual climax of the song. It's why when that first note drops, there's such an emotional connection for us as the audience. Because not only have we invested all this time to reach this point in the piece, but on top of that, the artist has tricked us into thinking the climax of the piece had already been reached earlier. And this is what makes Pinocchio P such a powerful composer. Because a song like I'm Glad You're Evil 2 was not something that could be achieved overnight. No. It's a song that takes careful planning, arranging, and more than anything else, risk-taking by the composer. I don't think the reason why songs like I'm Glad You're Evil 2 are so rare isn't because a large audience can't appreciate them. Artists like Bob Dylan have been proving that wrong since the 60s. It's just that for most artists, this is a very tall feat to pull off. You can't just make a boring 6 minutes for your piece and expect the audience to wait for the last 30 seconds to get that full experience. It has to be consistently entertaining the whole way through. For the audience, it has to be a journey, one that fully engages them. And some people might write that off as too much work and stick to that standard formula. And once again, there's nothing wrong with that. But I'll tell you what, those of us who have stuck through to reach that last 30 seconds, to reach that crucial moment that pulls everything together, will tell you it's a feeling that can't be put into words. A feeling of emotion that only something like art could truly convey to you. And I think that's why I'm Glad You're Evil 2 is a masterpiece. But how did Pinocchio P get to this point as a musician? How did a small producer in the early 2010s become such a popular producer, despite all the boundaries he likes to break within Vocaloid? That's what we'll explore next time. Thanks for watching.